we're overlooking our own bodies, let alone the people that we should be connected with. And so my best advice is not mine to give. It's one that was handed to me, and it's probably been around since the beginning of time, is find a quiet place. And if all you can find is 5 minutes, sit with yourself and ask yourself, your body, your mind, your heart, and your spirit, what is most important today? I promise you, it will probably be something like you.
Today's podcast guest is Joe Brazel. Joe is a licensed marriage and family therapist and is a retired Army veteran. Joe's spirit change moment happened 15 years ago, right after he came back from deployment from Afghanistan. He recalls this training incident that went wrong, and it changed his life forever. And Joe remembers in that moment, the first thought that he had was he had not prioritized the people that were most important in his life. So his spirit change moment walks us through that journey, but it also causes us to question, how are we prioritizing the people and the things that are most important in our lives? Oh my goodness. So welcome to the Spirit Change podcast, everyone. I am super excited about today's conversation. We have this amazing gentleman. His name is Joe Brazel. He is a retired Army veteran, and his story is just absolutely amazing. And as we talk about just mental health this month, he is a licensed marriage counselor, and I'm sure he will definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but welcome to the Spirit Change podcast, Joe Brazel. So glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Angela. I'm excited to be here and talk about mental health.
Thanks. So, I always kick off my Spirit Change podcast with each guest asking them, what is one word that you would use to describe yourself and why?
Yeah, one word to describe myself. I think the best word would be adventure. If I were only held to one word, that would probably be the word that would best suit me, adventure.
Okay, and tell us a little bit more about why.
Yeah, man, since I can remember, I have been jumping off of things, swinging off of things, climbing things, always interested in what's around a corner, what is the unknown, and pushing myself. And I think that's kind of carried itself through my childhood, through my time in the military. And believe it or not, I find working with families and marriages adventurous. Okay. Helping people overcome challenges is an adventurous thing. So it's still way part of the way I live my life. And you never know what you're going to get. And I like being flexible enough to deal with whatever comes my way. So adventure would be the word that best describes it.
I love it. I love it. So, Joe, when you think about that spirit change moment, that I always describe it to as that life-defining moment. You didn't quite know what was going to happen. But, when you look back, you realize how it's shaped your life and how it's led you to where you are today. So what's your spirit change moment?
When you let me know that this would be something that we were going to talk about, I had a little bit of trouble of trying to figure out. I think those are awesome points in changes for people. And so I have a profession now where we pay attention to big things that help change your pivot your direction or things that you do. And I think that I'm grateful to have many of those experiences. Now, I know we don't have enough time to talk about all of the different spirit change moments, but I think it's a real neat thing that you've done with your podcast is pulling those out. Mm-hmm. And I think that the most significant one is almost about 15 years ago, after returning from my third deployment in Afghanistan, I was doing a regular training event. We had just returned back home from deployment. Not even the entire unit was home yet. And we were doing some training with demolitions and with live ammunitions, just continuing to keep ourselves sharp. And during that training range, there was an accident. It was what we call a misfire. where a bunch of explosives had not went off. And I was a safety officer that particular day. And when I went to go secure and take care of the explosives, they exploded about 6 feet from me. Horrible day, horrible moment. I can smile about it now, but myself and several other folks were extremely injured that day. And it's not a bummer, but you ask the question, and then I think about it. It was at that particular moment. It was at the moment where I had been hurt, unlike anything had ever happened to me before. It was the kind of hurt that at least in my mind, I knew for a fact that I was not going to recover at all from this. I thought I was going to die. And I could hear my face was lacerated with explosions, and the warriors around me were trying to help me stop my bleeding, trying to help other folks that were injured. And I could hear them. I could hear the worry and the concern in their voice. Oh, Sergeant Braz, no. And I could hear those things. But all I could think about is the people who are about to watch me die, who are fighting as hard as they can to help me, are the people that I've just spent most of my adult life with, doing all of this adventurous stuff. And you do those things for other people that I hadn't quite had an opportunity to spend all the time that I wanted to with, like my wife and my daughter and my son. And that was quite the spare change moment for me. Is I'm about to die and meet Christ, right, and I have not yet had a chance to give the people that I most care about all of my time, effort, and energy. Right. And the people that I did give all my time, effort, and energy to are about to be the ones who will tell my story. And that left me feeling empty. It left me feeling like, if Lord, if you just give me a little more time, if you just, if I get a chance to come out of this opportunity, I promise not to wait to be the dad and the husband I'm going to be. Because being a hero is great, but being a hero amongst other heroes is not enough. Mm-hmm. It wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. So I bled out at that range and was put in a coma for a couple of days because of the trauma. And so that was my final thoughts at the moment. That was kind of, if you want to call it, a final prayer. Mm-hmm. It was, if there would be another opportunity, Lord, I promise to live every day with the most important people first in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I woke up 3 days later, mm-hmm, and that's who was around me then. So when I woke up in the hospital, I had bandages over my eye, I had a lot of eye damage. Mm-hmm. But the voices I could hear when I woke up were my wife, mm-hmm, my daughter, and my son, and my mother, and my sisters, my best friends. And then that started a whole amazing recovery and really trying to honor the promise that I had made to God, to the day I'm sitting right here.
Wow, wow, wow. Oh my goodness. So I'm over here trying not to cry, but what an amazing story. And even the promise that you made. And now, hindsight, we were talking on the front end, but now I understand a little bit about your journey and just how that has really shifted, even the way that you navigate in the world right now. So can we touch a little bit about you as you talked about your story, and you talked about potentially dying, amongst people that you spend your time with, but not the people that you love the most, right? Mm-hmm. So how has that shifted your life now, Joe? How are you living life now?
Yeah, the further I get away from that moment, mm-hmm, I had to think about it today as we were talking. We call them alive days, right? In the warrior community. And I think it's even spread outside of the warrior community, but when you've had these spare change moments, right, we call them alive days. It's the day that I recognize that I'm alive. Right. And I don't ever want to take that for granted. And so for me, I have a mantra, mm-hmm, and it's usually like, if I die today, I mean, man, you could fill in the blocks, the blanks for, the back end of that conversation. But what does that do to you when you ask that question to yourself? If I died today, and what kind of thoughts come up for you? And usually for me, it's, have I followed as much as I possibly can understand what Christ has asked me to do? That's different now than it was 15 years ago. But whoever it was I was talking to, I know now, but whoever it was that I was making these prayers to 15 years ago, I knew was superseded mankind. Because I had a whole bunch of superheroes around me who couldn't put me back together. And so I kind of have a list, and it's, how are me and Christ? How are me and my wife? If I died today, how are me and my kids? How are me and my mother? How are me and I just go down this list. How are me and my clients? Good days, it could be, how are me and my neighbor? So when I first got hurt, that was a very small kind of circle of, man, if I die today, I really don't want to get caught slipping. Not something as simple as, honey, I swear I'm going to put this new shelf in.
Yeah.
Or looking my little daughter in the face and saying, baby, I promise I'll teach you how to catch a fish. And man, the emptiness that I was feeling when I was on that range was, man, there wouldn't be enough time. I thought there would be, and there's not. So how that's changed is, when the sun comes up in the morning, it's a blessing. It's like Christmas every morning when I wake up. When the sun is up in the morning, I get another chance, I get another opportunity. And 15 years later, that's like natural caffeine. That's like a natural, that has risen me out of the bed for 15 years strong.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So there is so much to unpack there, Joe. And, as you were talking, I think about just life, kind of to your point, right? We're just going through life in many cases and not thinking about the fact that life could dramatically change in just a matter of seconds, right?
Yeah.
And you had said earlier about not taking life for granted, and I when, to launch this podcast, my primary focus was really to get people to think differently about their circumstances or situation, because a lot of times when people are going through change, especially tumultuous seasons of change, some of them might not have the the fortitude, if you would, to turn that on. They might just get stuck in their circumstances, right? And it sounds like your faith was pivotal for you, in the midst of that, right? It kind of recentered you. It helped to prioritize the people in your life and even the actions that you take and how you even engage with people. And when you think about, that person or persons that might be listening to your story, that might just be on autopilot and not thinking about their greater purpose or the broader vision of their life, what would you say to them about living their life and maybe even taking it for granted?
Yeah. Much like the words I just used, it's a great way to build a therapeutic conversation around living on purpose. And I find that to be adventurous to do with the client, adventurous to do with friends. If you were to die today and you were to have an opportunity to speak to one person, that's it. That's all you get is one chance, right? And so maybe if I could play a little bit, we have this amazing ability to create all different types of stuff inside of our mind. Imagination is a really cool gift of ours, where we can think about things that aren't necessarily real and play them out in our mind. And so this is not a morbid question. This is me playing on your or anyone's imagination. And so if today were the last day of your life and you only had one opportunity to speak to somebody, who would that be? Think about that question. Who could sum up the sum total of, and to be content. So it's a lot of choices, right? When we have opportunity and we have time, we feel like we have all the chances and opportunities available to us. But if we were to just imagine, if you only had a chance to speak to one person, who would that be? Then we could explore the importance of that person. And we could ask ourselves questions like, are you serving that person the way you want to? Is that person going to tell the story about you that you hoped that they would tell? And we can go down that list of, if we got one more chance to talk to one more person. And being a family therapist, looking back, I can realize these things a little easier than from my own personal point of view. But a lot of times when we get stuck, or when we get lost, or we get into places where we are hopeless, if we paid attention to the community that's around us, we could also see that God designs that to fill us up. It's a part of our life. We are not just individual, but we're a community as well. And our culture kind of gives us all these little pockets of secrecy and autonomy and independence, which are all great things, but they're lonely if you're doing them by yourself.
Right.
And so paying attention to that is what I would say to somebody is sometimes not focusing on yourself, but focusing on the people that really believe in you is something that would help get you out of a stuck point.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about that in last week's podcast as well. How you really need your inner circle and your inner circle support. But to your point, we were all born communal, right? We were all meant to really spend time with other people, and it helps us grow. When we spend time with other people, sometimes people become a reflection of who we are and how we show up in the world. Sometimes we don't like to see that reflection, but to your point, and I love the question that you asked. Who would be that one person that you'd want to talk to? Because that would really reveal it could reveal some of the brokenness that's going on in your life. Those spaces where you might potentially need to heal or maybe even neglect. So that's a very interesting conversation. And especially as you think about, the family structure, because so many times, we take our family, we take them for granted. We believe that they will always be there. But it's in those moments, those life-defining moments, where we realize that we might have neglected someone, or, we misprioritized people. And so I can definitely appreciate all of that. And and ideally for the person that is out there listening, and for them, it might not be as easy to make that change, right? Because they might be looking at all of the external, perhaps maybe their external responsibilities. What would you say to someone that is looking at all of their external responsibilities, but they know that they need to prioritize the people in their lives, but they haven't quite done it yet?
Yeah. Maybe 7-8 years ago, I went to a mindfulness retreat that was ran by a bunch of super sweet monks and sisters. And they were teaching veterans that week. They held us for a 9-day meditation retreat to teach us how to breathe. And I bring it up because in our amazing culture, Las Vegas used to be the only place that never slept, but the world never stops anymore. And so there are all types of things binging and dinging and asking for your attention and asking for your engagement. And so when you're caught up in those externals, if I'm getting your question right, if you're caught up in those externals and you're having a hard time prioritizing, and that's a difficult thing, the first thing I would say is find yourself a quiet spot. Find yourself a quiet place where there's no bings and dings. It won't be quiet, but you'll notice that. You'll see that. You'll see what's happening around you, and you'll be able to ground yourself in the moment that you're in. You'll be able to pay attention to the most important thoughts that are crossing your mind. the things that you actually really are concerned about before, I don't know, Hardee's might be having a buy one, get one free sale or something and take your mind away from you. And so it's harder than it actually sounds. But most people do not have a quiet place. Most people do not have a regular routine of setting aside some quietness. And if that's difficult for you, baby steps would be something like turn the radio off in the car when you're driving and just sit and listen. No intention whatsoever, just listen and see what's reoccurring, see what's coming to you, see what is happening with your breath. And this is a place for us to get grounded and put a more realistic perspective on what should get done today. What should I prioritize today? Where should I actually spend my time? Because we're moving so fast, you're not even paying attention that your back hurts. You don't even realize that you haven't put on the shoes that are best good for you that day, or that your arm and your shoulder has been bothering you for weeks, and you should have made a phone call a long time. We're overlooking our own bodies, let alone the people that we should be connected with. And so my best advice is not mine to give. It's one that was handed to me, and it's probably been around since the beginning of time, is find a quiet place. And if all you can find is 5 minutes, sit with yourself and ask yourself, your body, your mind, your heart, and your spirit, what is most important today? I promise you, it will probably be something like you.
Wow.
So those would be the words that I would say to help people who might have a hard time prioritizing.
Wow, I love that. So when you think about this thought, because a lot of, to your point, in our society, we're taught that everyone else matters, right? We're talking about we're taught that climbing the corporate ladder matters, or that busyness matters, right? Over anything else. And so for the person that's listening that, have a hard time prioritizing them, I love the fact that you said, first of all, shift to mindfulness, right? So just sitting alone, even if that's for 5 minutes a day, just find that space to where you can sit alone and capture your own thoughts, pay attention to what's going on in your mind, but then also taking care of yourself, your body. So what is it that you need personally to heal and to be whole? Because we can be busy, so busy going through life for such an extended period of time, taking care of everybody else, focused on other people's priorities and not our own. And we're losing sight of our own health and our own mental wellness, right? And then we find ourselves collapsed somewhere, or, in someone's hospital, trying to figure out how did we get here. And it's the simple fact that we just didn't take care of ourselves. We just didn't prioritize us. So what I heard you say, Joe, is that, this spirit change moment, your spirit change moment allowed you to not only prioritize you, it allowed you to prioritize your family. But were there any other lessons that you learned over that time that you think would be practical advice to other people that are listening as well?
Yeah, even as you're talking, I'm realizing that one of the big lessons is the body that you're in is what you get to experience this world. And I remember a good friend who's a pastor had mentioned, he gave me a compliment one time. He said, "I love how you keep folks focused on the body."
Mm-hmm.
And I usually on my Instagram, I'll post motivational videos in the morning, short little videos, just telling people to get up and be in their body. Mm-hmm. Because that's the thing that was taken from me. I told you that adventure was something that I've had since I was a kid. Right. So the hardest part for my recovery was my mind was with me as soon as I woke up. I was so grateful. God gave me another chance. I get to be with the people around me, and that was gratitude instantly as soon as I woke up. But what was frustrating is the things I wanted to do in the world, I had to wait until my leg healed, to my arm healed, to my face healed, to I could walk again. I had to learn how to hear things and see things. I had depth perception issues. And so I spent probably about 2 years in and out of a hospital over and over and over again. And once again, these great countries, doctors, and this great country in general, I had a team of people put me back together. I understand that not many people are fortunate enough to have a whole team of people around you making sure that you focus on you. And so the body is extremely important to me. It's just something that I think is important for us to pay attention to. We sit down a lot. We work on the internet and virtual worlds, which is a lot of mind activity. But as you mentioned, if we don't pay attention, the body is a major priority to how you are going to enjoy the day. It will just shut down on you, right? It will stop you quicker than anything else of accomplishing or doing the things that you want to do in your world.
Mhm.
And so I guess I'm just saying that additionally, the body does matter. What we give, the golden rule, Jesus says what? He says, treat others as, or love others as you would want to love yourself. And I think that we're missing that part, right? Is he's assuming that the best way to know how to love someone else is how you would love yourself. And so if you did a little quick analysis, should you be loving anyone the way you're loving yourself right now?
Right, right.
And sometimes that question, I don't want my own answer. I don't want my own reflection answer, because I don't think you would want to be loved sometimes about how I'm loving myself, because sometimes I'm overlooking myself.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Now that was a word right there. That was a word. Like if the way that I'm loving myself right now, would I want to love somebody else like that? And I think about, it took me going through my own cancer journey to prioritize myself, right? And to prioritize the things that I love, because to your point is, you go through life and, everything else, the work and everything else is so important. And now it's just taking the time out. I've never been adventurous, but now I'm trying to take the time out to explore more of the world. And I don't want my daughter to go through this world and think that all she was made to do was to work, or to fall under someone else's control or, span of demand. Right. And so, so it shifted something in me, just like I hear that it shifted something in you. And so for the people that are listening to this podcast, I would hope that they would not have to go through an event for them to find adventure in their life, for them to prioritize themselves and love themselves enough so that they can be, in return, love other people more deeply. Yeah. I love that. I love that. You were about to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just, you said you wouldn't want for people to have to go through an event. And I don't think we would want to share our traumas with others.
Right.
But God uses challenges to increase our faith and endurance.
That's true.
Now, nobody, I work with a lot of wounded warriors. So a lot of folks who have received, that's kind of a specialty of mine around trauma, whether it's amputations or abuses to the body, or all of those challenges push and pull and shape kind of the way that we walk. And I think all challenges should be paid attention. And so maybe I would layer or add onto your words is, I just hope people pay attention to their challenge to see what is it in that particular challenge that's for them. There's always something, there's always a present in a challenge, and God tells us this, but if you just look at training in general, we whether it's training for a sports team or being in the military, or no purpose can be accomplished without sacrifice. So purpose is found in digging around through sacrifice, and sacrifice often comes in the form of challenge. And so, no, I would not want anyone to overlook their small challenges, because those presents are easy to receive. And the big challenges might take you a while, and you might need some additional support. And if we can limit the big traumatic challenges and pay way more attention to our smaller challenges, that would be my prayer for folks. To see it as soon as they come.
That's good. And I love the way you said that there's always a presence in the challenges, right? There's always like a lesson that you can learn, something that you can gain from that moment. And I think that in life, especially, as I do change management, I help people through different seasons of their life, primarily from an organizational standpoint. But you think about the fact that most people just get stuck on the problem and they don't think about the lessons that they've learned or what they've gained over the season. They typically just focus on that loss. And what I love about your spirit is that you focus on what you've gained and the ability to live each and every single day to its fullest. And if we could go through life like that and just navigating our challenges, as a new adventure for us to explore. When I went through my cancer journey, I woke up every day saying, okay, what adventure is this going to bring me today? Because it gave me the ability to shift my mindset and not think about just the challenges alone, right? It was a new way for me to frame it and a new way for me to learn that mental endurance. And also navigate differently. So one thing that I do want to touch on before we transition out, as a veteran, first and foremost, thank you so much for your service. And for all those veterans that are listening, our freedom, our freedom comes at a cost for sure. But I would be remiss if we didn't talk about just some of the trauma that's related, specifically like PTSD. Because I know that impacts a lot of our soldiers that return back from war. And so the veteran that might be listening or someone that might be struggling with PTSD from other traumas in their life, is there, something that you would have or a message that you would have for them in this moment as you think about your spirit change moment?
Yeah, I'm actually, I'm in the works of writing a book around this same kind of topic. And the body matters. When we're talking about trauma, the body matters. It's actually probably the number one difficulty is that the body is doing things I don't want it to do. And we're wondering why. And that's, no gunslinger wants to come see me if they don't have to. Right? No husband wants to walk in there humbled to fix his marriage, right? No independent female wants to admit that there's something happening that we need to talk about. And so we work really hard to build ourselves up to be capable and strong, and those things are all values that military folks hold and their family members. But the body, when the body has received acts of violence or fears of death, those things get etched inside the nervous system. And you can't play it away, you can't drink it away, you can't isolate it away. And those things are in the body. So you need therapies that approach the body. And I've mentioned several of them as we've been talking. And if we can get all the counselor words away that scare people away, it's like, take some time to breathe. Ask your body what it needs, what exactly, and that's really what's happening through PTSD, right? Is the body needs something more than you are paying attention to. And don't be afraid to get some help with someone who will help you with your body. Because once you understand what your body is saying to you, now I say this, but in a way I was shut down completely to do nothing but pay attention to my body. So it's a little difficult when we're talking about silent traumas where it's happening mentally or it's happening, but no one can see it. So it's hard to share when we've been abused or traumatized in ways that aren't visible, like my experience, which is one of the things that led me to become a counselor. Is it's like, I know, right? I know. And so it's better to just welcome. I'd like to be someone who helps welcome those invisible wounds that come in, because I know if I can help you communicate with your body, and if you can help you and your body feel safe again, you'll be able to be back on your adventurous road, maybe never like it was before. But the one thing that's changed that I would want you and anyone else who's listening to know is that it's important to pay attention to your body. And if you don't, at some point, it will make you pay attention to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Joe Brazel, I could talk to you for hours, and I am pretty sure that the listeners probably would want more, right? But, I just want to thank you so much again for being on. And, for those who are listening, you've heard it here. So pay attention to the challenges, especially specifically in your body, right? The one thing that I love that I wrote down is there's always a presence in the challenge that you're experiencing. Yeah. So Joe Brazel, thank you so much again for your for being here today and for sharing to the Spirit Change podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you tuning in to this episode of Spirit Change. Be sure to stay connected for future episodes. You can follow me on social media or visit my website at angelargarman.com. Talk to you soon.